Welcome to the Financial Pathway Podcast. We're here to help you go to the next level in your finances with practical advice from speaker and financial planner Nate Skelly.
Will Social Security still be around when you retire? I'm sure you've seen the headlines. Things like Social Security is going to run out of money by X year, or seniors can no longer count on their Social Security, or the next financial crash is going to completely wipe out the system. There are a lot of doubts around Social Security and its long-term solvency. And I'm just going to say this at the outset of this episode. Social Security, for whatever reason, is a really hard term for me to say over and over again, especially fast. I'm going to shorten it to SSI. So as I go through this episode today, when I say SSI, I'm talking about Social Security. If you want to do a deep dive, there is a great article from Adam Van Duysen. I'm sorry, Adam, if I'm butchering your last name, but I will link to that in the show notes if you want to read a deeper article on a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about today. It's a great one. But here's what I want to talk or walk through with you today. Number one, what is the status of the SSI program? What potential changes could there be to SSI in the future? And then thirdly, most importantly, what does this mean for you and for your financial plan? So let's start here. Where does the SSI money come from? Well, mostly it comes from FICA taxes. You may already be aware, but 6.2% of your pay goes to SSI. And then your employer matches that 6.2%. If you are self-employed, you get to pay both of those. This tax is only on the first $168,000 of your income. A lot of people are not aware that if you make above that, you don't pay any more into Social Security. So let's say somebody makes $250,000 a year in their salary, they're paying 6.2% on that first $168,000, but that next $82,000 they're not paying anything. And essentially what's happening is we are taking a portion of the current worker's pay and we are redistributing it over here to those who are now eligible to receive SSI. So it's just a redistribution, taking from people who are still working and then paying it out to the people who are no longer working. And the people who are no longer working, the people who are receiving, they were doing the same thing when they were working. They were taking part of their pay and they were paying the people who were already retired. And the challenge to the program is the ratio of people who are paying into Social Security and receiving those benefits keeps getting smaller and smaller. It used to be 7-1 back in the 1930s when the program was developed. Today, it's about 2.7 workers for every one taking out, 2.7 paying in. And of course, now we have the baby boomer generation, very large generation. They're entering retirement. And so that ratio just continues to narrow and narrow. We've got a lot of people taking out of the program, not nearly as many people on a ratio basis paying in. So right now, the FICA taxes, that 6.2% tax, it doesn't cover 100% of the benefits that are due. So what do we do to make up the difference? Well, we have some trust funds in place with some excess money from years gone by that are designated for SSI. And so we take from those reserves each year to make up the difference. But based on current projections, the way things are going, all of those reserve funds would run out by the year 2035. And at that time, SSI would no longer be able to pay out the full benefits to everybody. So when you hear these headlines of people talking about, oh, Social Security is going to run out of money, what they're talking about is those reserve funds. But keep in mind, the FICA taxes are still going to be there. People are still going to be paying their taxes, and they would still be able to pay out about 83% of scheduled benefits when the reserves run out. Does that make sense? In other words, right now, with just the taxes that we're collecting from people, we could pay most of the benefits, but we do have to bridge that gap with reserves, but the reserves are running out. And when the reserves run out, those taxes will no longer cover the full amount. They'll only cover 83%. And then as time goes on, by the end of the 21st century, it would get down to about 73% of scheduled benefits. So it's definitely a good news, bad news scenario. Well, the bad news, of course, is that on our current path, it's not sustainable. We got to make some changes. But the good news is that even in this worst case scenario, SSI doesn't disappear. Okay, it's not like all of a sudden we're going to wake up one day and nobody's going to be able to get their Social Security check. It simply would be reduced by about 20%. When I say simply, I mean not that that's like, oh yeah, no big deal. But for all the people who are worrying about SSI not being there when they're retired, that's not really the reality of the situation. Now, All of this is assuming, of course, that we don't do anything. We just continue at our current trajectory, but that seems very unlikely. Both Republicans and Democrats have a vested interest to keep the SSI program going and full benefits being paid out, because if either of them were to allow this to just run out and now benefits to drop, that would be a disaster, politically speaking. So what can we do? What is likely to happen? What kind of changes are being considered? Now, I should say this. There is no specifics from either Republicans or Democrats, any plans that I have seen put forth to say, here's what we're going to do to fix Social Security. Honestly, I think everyone's just sort of waiting till we get closer to that time, kind of kicking the can down the road, because to try to tackle it right now would probably be pretty unpopular. And so nobody really wants to touch that political football right now. Here are some possible changes just from a mathematical standpoint. If we want to get it back in place where we can cover 100% of benefits, one thing we could do is we could raise the FICA taxes. If we bump up the taxes by 3.33%, that would bridge the gap. And that could possibly be split between employer and employee. So it's not necessarily 3.33 of your pay. It would be between your pay and the employer. So your portion would go up from 6.2% to 7.865%. So you would be paying more into FICA, but the program would now be solvent once again. Or we could lower benefits. If we lower benefits by 21%, that would also put us back on track. So the average payment right now is about $1,919 a month from Social Security. That would bring that down about $400 a month. Don't hold your breath for this option. I don't think anybody is going to say, we'll take less money. I don't think anybody's going to go for that option. Third option is we could raise the retirement age. We could move back the full retirement age. We've already done this. We moved the full retirement age from 65 back to 67 because people live longer. Back when SSI was developed, people didn't live all that long. People weren't in retirement for very many years, but now they are. And of course, that changes a lot of the math. So we move those numbers back. If we moved, so right now it's 67. If we move it back to, say, 69, without any other changes to the program, that gets us about 40% of the way there. So if you wanted to get all the way there, you'd have to move it back even further. That would be tough to do. I don't think a lot of people are going to go for moving the full retirement age back much more than a year or two. Another option is we could introduce a new tax on high income. For example, if we introduced a tax on income above $400,000, because remember, right now you only pay those taxes up to $168,000, then you don't pay any more. But if you said, okay, only people making more than $400,000 now have to pay this extra tax towards SSI, that would get us about 2/3 of the way there. So lots of different levers to pull. There's also a few other tweaks that are possible, but the ones that I just mentioned seem to be the most likely options. My guess would be that it will be a combination of raising the tax, the FICA tax, and pushing back the retirement age. I think it's going to be a combination of those two things. I think politicians will be hesitant to want to tackle this issue until we're closer to the deadline, because it's unpopular no matter how you slice it, telling people you got to wait longer or you got to pay more in taxes. Now, on a personal level, if you're worried about what a future reduction to your SSI payment might look like, talk to your financial advisor. Ask them. Say, hey, worst case scenario, if my Social Security benefits were to drop to 83% of their current level indexed for inflation by 2035, what would that look like? Does that make a difference for me? Remember, that is the worst case scenario. There is no scenario here where we're actually thinking about having no monthly payment, no monthly benefit. Worst case scenario is about a 20% reduction on that payment in about 11 years. If you are not retired though, so if you're already collecting Social Security, then you may want to start thinking about, okay, worst case scenario, what if that benefit were to be reduced by 20%? Does it still work? Am I still going to be okay? But if you're not retired and you're still some years away from collecting your SSI, this would be a reminder that while it's still going to be there for you in some form or fashion, it was never going to pay anywhere close to your pre-retirement income, even at its current levels. The average Social Security recipient gets about 40% of their pre-retirement income. So this really underscores the importance of saving for retirement, building multiple income streams, the less you need to rely on Social Security, the better. And there's a lot of people right now whose only source of income is their monthly check. And that's really tough. That's really, really hard to make ends meet when that's all you've got. So saving money in your 401k and your Roth IRA and investing in a business, investing in real estate, investing in side income is always a great idea to build multiple streams of income for retirement. So there you go. Next time you hear somebody worrying about whether Social Security is going to be there, share this episode with them. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube page or followed the podcast, please make sure you do, and you can keep getting helpful episodes like this one, and I will see you next time.